Yeah, I'll just say up front today, I am talking to Jim Ousley. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You are actually one of the few people that I know who does pronounce it correctly. It's
All
usually
right.
yes.
Well, I haven't I don't think I've ever heard your name pronounced, but we do have a mutual
That makes it
friend.
even more magic.
Yeah, we do
I mean,
have a
that's
mutual friend, Jason Green, who I think
yeah.
is the one who put us in touch. We may have crossed paths at a comic book convention. I don't remember. It's likely that we did, but I know it was Jason's recommendation. He's the one who set was able to set this up, and because
He's really good at that.
yeah, he is. He. I
He's
mean,
a great people connector.
this is like the fifth episode where I've sung the praises of Jason Green.
Yeah. Well, I
Just
mean, he's so good. I mean, he's such a great. I mean, obviously he's a good writer and everything else, but
mm.
as an editor, I mean, he's indispensable.
Now
For me anyway.
he's worked with you as an editor, right?
Yeah, he's done quite a few things now. He did the Dead Palace horror anthology from a few years ago. He did Butcher Queen Black Star City, that
Mm-hmm.
first series, and he did Butcher Queen Planet of the Dead, the most recent series.
Okay,
And he'll be
yeah.
doing Atonement Bell.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah. Jason's worked a little bit with me too in an editing
I saw
capacity.
that.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I agree. We both agree. Jason is amazing, and he's the secret ingredient to success, I think.
yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah.
In fact, he did I one of my lockdown pandemic projects was a haiku book,
Mm-hmm.
like a book of my stupid haikus, that I post.
Uh-huh.
And there was there was one haiku that wasn't actually a haiku. It was missing like a syllable. And he was like, Jim, that's not even a haiku. It's like, oh yeah, of course. Like he catches everything that I
Yeah,
miss.
he's got an eagle eye. It's true. I
Yeah.
I had him read a book, not as an editor. He just read the book and he hit me back. He's like, I know I wasn't working as an editor on this, but here's just some things I caught you might want to be aware of. And I'm like, awesome, thank you. Yeah, I'll put your name in the
Yeah.
credits. Even though you're not working in an official capacity,
Right. Yeah.
just he
Yeah.
just it nothing escapes it. Yeah,
He's so good. Yeah.
but we don't want to make this whole episode about our friend Jason.
Even though he deserves it.
He certainly does. Yeah, we both agree. But why don't we start this off? Can you just introduce yourself? Just explain a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, my name is Jim Ousley. I'm the writer of Butcher Queen, the Butcher Queen series, the Dead Palace, and the Rough and Tumble. And I'm actually writing a new series called the Atonement Bell for next year that I'm doing a Kickstarter for now, actually.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, I've worked with Ben Sawyer a lot on the Butcher Queen series. He's my co-creator on that. And I hope to do, excuse me, another one in the future, like a third and final series with him. But this time I'm working with an artist out of Los Angeles named Raymond Estrada, who's he's got a book coming out actually this summer on Red 5 called The Box. That's really good. And that's how I first saw him. And I was like, oh my God, I've got to get this guy on this Atonement Bell because he's so good and so perfect at horror.
Yeah.
Like exactly what I imagined. And he hasn't, disappointed at all.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I got my start working with Ink and Drink Comics,
Mm-hmm.
and which is a great organization if you're wanting to, do your own comics and learn more about comics. Because Jason Green, who we talked about, Steve Higgins and Carlos, they all they get people together once a month, and they publish 2 anthologies a year. They get like
Mm-hmm.
writers and artists together and stuff. And they publish 2 anthologies a year, each one with a different theme, and it's great. It's a great way to learn, and
Yeah.
that's what I did.
Was that your first step into comic book writing? Was for Ink and Drink?
It was for comic book writing. It was me and my friend Oscar Madrid. We worked on a couple of screenplays together.
Mm-hmm.
One that got optioned, that's still under option actually, and
Cool.
another one which we produced here in St. Louis. Actually, is an indie feature called
Mm-hmm.
like macro budget feature called Hoochie
Yeah.
Daddy-O. But
I'm
it
sorry,
ended up
what was the name again? One more time.
Hooch and Daddy-O.
Okay.
If you have Tubi, it's on Tubi,
Hmm.
which is the the app. Uh, but it actually went around the world and won a few awards at like not the Cannes Film Festival or anything, but like
Hmm.
Atlanta Comedy Festival and things like that. Um, and I had worked for Jason again at Playback STL and doing reviews and interviews and things like that. So I've been writing for a while, but comics just for the past, I guess, almost 10 years now.
Uh-huh.
And I loved it, because I was a huge comics fan and was like, well, this makes sense to do this
Oh,
next.
totally. Yeah. That's pretty cool though that you kind of got your start through doing Ink and Drink.
Mhm.
That's something I've talked about in this podcast before with other comic book writers, and it's something that always comes up with people that want to get into the comic book game, especially coming from as a writer, not an artist,
Right.
and that is to always start small and kind of learn with short stories, because it's a lot of people that come to comic books are coming as comic book fans, and
Right.
they're thinking, like Chris Claremont wrote X-Men for 17 years. I've got my 200 issue epic in my head and I want to get it all out there. And it's
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
you are not going to spend 17 years on your first comic. You will be lucky if you spend 1 year on your first comic, So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's good though. It looks like you took the correct path by starting with the short stories and building up.
Yeah. And what was weird was that I was actually kind of afraid of writing short stories up to that point because we had my writing partner and I at the
Mm,
time were working on long form things, and I thought, how on earth do you write a 4-page or 8-page comic short?
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
but got the hang of it and started to really enjoy it. Now I love doing that as well as the
Hmm.
the more serialized things. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough. It's definitely the thing that I struggle with the most is coming up with short stories. Like I think a lot of writers are prone to just ideas are always churning and you want to build and build and build and build. And
Yeah,
it's very difficult to just do something small in a short span of pages.
that's what would get me all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I am kind of curious though. You did you started writing in screenplays and then
Uh-huh.
you kind of moved into comics. So was there anything about writing for comics that initially you either struggled with or just struck you as odd that you weren't used to or prepared for, as opposed to writing a screenplay, writing for a comic script?
I don't think so. Nothing that struck me as odd. I mean, I immediately saw what the differences were though.
Hmm.
It's when you're doing a screenplay, you're not involved in a production yet. You're just writing the screenplay. And it's a very
Yeah.
isolated process. It's just
Hmm.
you. When you're working on a comic script, you're keeping panels in mind and knowing the artist you're working with, whether he wants a lot of description or just a little description. So that's probably the the biggest difference that I could see,
Hmm.
which is probably pretty normal, I guess. But every artist is quite a bit different. They have different needs and different wants, and if you're a writer, you just have to be open to that, and that's what the collaborative process is all about, and
Hmm.
it's a shared
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I agree. I've always said that's one of the unique things about comic book scripting, at least certainly on the level, like on the indie level or the small press level, where you're working a little bit more intimately with the artist, and it is different than just writing a screenplay that is eventually going to get handed off to a director, and then it becomes the director's movie
Yeah,
building off of your screenplay.
right,
Whereas on an indie level, you are filling the role of the director, because if without you pushing it and finding an artist to work with, it's not going to get made. There's no
right.
middleman who's going to pick it up and do it.
But using the same film comparison too, what's great about comics is that when you're working on a screenplay, you sometimes you're thinking, okay, it's not going to be a big budget thing or this or that. When you're working
Mhm.
in comics, the sky is the limit, really. I mean, you could do
Right.
whatever you want to, and there's
Yeah.
no limitations at all. And
Hmm.
that's what's magic about it. That's what's so fun and freeing about it, as a creative person. And I love that. I love comics for that, you
Hmm.
know. Even now today, as good as comic book films are, um, I still think that, most of those stories are best told in comics.
Yeah.
They everything makes more sense. The physics make more sense, are more believable, of it all, and um, everything. The costumes are just it's more grounded and settled in that medium.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that there's something about one of the reasons I love comic books more than say a live action film, even if it's something that's adapted from a comic book. Like there's so many comic book movies out right now.
Yeah,
But I would say one of the things that I love about the comic book medium is that it's visual, but it's still literature. Like it still has the text,
sure.
and I do think that there is something that is a benefit from that extra degree of separation. Like when you're
Right,
watching a film, you're watching a person. You're watching an actor, and they're doing things and they're saying things, and it's sometimes it's hard to separate the actor from the material,
right,
and not even like in a good or bad way. It's just like it's just a subconscious thing. It's like that's a person doing something. Whereas in a book, there is that extra degree of separation, so you can just see the text, see the images, and it's abstract in your head, so you're able to put it all together with
right.
like that complete separation from tying it to anybody else. But because it's a comic book, it still has the visuals, so it just makes it really easy to draw forth all that imagery.
Right, and the two things work in this really magical way. I sometimes compare it to watching a silent film or a foreign film that has subtitles.
Hmm.
You're watching it, and then you're reading the text. And for me, anyway, I'm sure this isn't the case for you know everybody, but
Right.
when it's me, that draws me into it more. You know what I mean? It just
Hmm.
draws me in. It makes it in a way more participatory. You know,
Yeah. Oh,
uh,
absolutely. Yeah.
and that's what that's
No,
what's
I
so
agree.
magic about comics to me.
Yeah, because I there are things that can read just fine in a book, like lines of dialogue or whatever. And in the context of the book, it's fine. But the minute you
Yeah,
put it in a movie with a person saying it, it sounds weird. And it's like
yeah,
cheesy or weird or goofy or whatever,
yeah.
or
And
just
every
unrealistic,
right, and and I know that every medium has its own kind of parameters and it's sort of like rules. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like what you just said, like something that would make sense in a comic. Sometimes if you say it in a movie, it's not going to land the same way.
Yeah.
And that's because there's an actor saying it in a more real world situation, and it's
Hmm.
like
Or
that has
even
to be
just having
changed.
the actor saying it, the actor has to make the decision of how they're going to deliver the line. And
Yeah,
that's, when it's just words on paper, it's up to the reader to interpret how that
sure.
works. So
Yeah,
I agree. That's one of the special things about comic books that I do think is it fits snugly between film and just full on prose,
sure.
and it's something that's a lot, it's easy to forget because a lot of people want to just make that leap to film, like film is the ultimate validation. It's,
Right.
movies are what make it great. But I agree, comics are just, a lot of things work in comics just fine by themselves.
Right. And it's amazing that, like, what I always think about is how great it is that comics are still around as a viable kind of thriving,
Mm-hmm.
art form,
Mm-hmm.
because it's kind of like with movies, when TV came along, they thought that was going to be the end of
So
movies.
yeah,
And
nobody's gonna go pay to see a movie when they can watch it for free in their house. Yeah.
right, yeah. Or the video stores, all that kind of stuff. They thought that
Mm-hmm.
movies would go away, theaters would go away. And with all these entertainment options and distractions, it's such an amazing thing in the 21st century that comic books are still a thing, and it's
Yeah.
it's awesome. It really is.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's actually incredible to me that the industry is thriving to the degree that it is, and it's shifting in its way.
Oh yeah,
Things are not the same they were 10, 20, 30. I mean, they've been predicting the end of the comic book industry since at least the 50s. you
yeah,
know so
yeah,
but yeah, it's I'm always overwhelmed at just the number of comics being produced. Like there's just seems like there's so many comic books, and I don't have enough time in the day to read all the books that I want to read.
Know.
You know,
it's like everything now. You know, that's what I noticed during the lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Was that in a way it was, you know, it was very fortuitous to have all these entertainment options in your house. You know, TV and streaming and comics and everything else. But it's like at a certain point, it's almost like you spend more time deciding what to do than actually enjoying it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a challenge now, but
it's
there are worse problems.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, as they say.
Yeah.
But so let's talk a little bit more about your work. You've got your book on Kickstarter. But before we get into that, so I know you were doing the Ink and Drink short stories, and then you did Butcher Queen. Did you fund that through Kickstarter also?
We did. Well, we while I was still in Ink and Drink, my writing partner that I would do screenplays with, we did a book with Ben Sawyer called The Rough and Tumble, which was a kind of an action comedy anthology.
Okay.
It was really fun, had fun stories and like fake ads and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
And then I started to write more stories on my own. And I did The Dead Palace on Kickstarter, which was a horror anthology, and that went really well. And in The Dead Palace, there was one of the shorts was called Butcher Queen, which had originally appeared in the Ink and Drink book. But I think Ben Sawyer, he was at a convention, I want to say maybe San Diego. I could have had that wrong, but he went there and gave them a copy of The Dead Palace, and they really liked it, and they said they wanted to work with us.
Cool.
Which was really great. And they initially talked about doing The Dead Palace as a like a 4-issue anthology, but they're like, well, the stories are different lengths by design, but they all have different lengths and stuff. And so they said, oh, we can't. It's not really doable, you know. Do you guys have anything from that book, like a character that you would like to spin off into their own series? And I was like, yeah, Butcher Queen. Yeah, because Senkyo is such a really, to me, a really cool, fascinating character. I love writing for her. And so we pitched that to them, and they liked it, and they said, okay, come back in a couple of weeks with the story outline and get, do that pitch, and then we'll move forward. And so I had like 2 weeks to conceptualize a 4-issue story and write like a full outline, detailed enough to let them know, that I could write the beginnings of the stories, and they would have a middle and good cliffhangers and things like that. But I managed to do that, and they liked it, and released it, and it did really well.
Oh, cool! Yeah,
my dog.
Oh, no problem. We are friends of animals on this podcast.
Good. She's got a lot to say. Okay, Maisie.
No worries.
I'm sure it's a big deal, like somebody walking down the street.
Right, yeah. Exactly. That's
the problem.
Yeah, just your neighbor just out like they are every day. Just yeah.
But so we did the first Butcher Queen series, and the first issue actually sold. The first issue actually sold out. And so it went well. And then I wanted to do one more Butcher Queen series, just because there were some different directions I wanted to take the characters and stuff. And so we did that. I was so happy we did, because I think out of both series, I love the first one and I'm proud of it. But the second series, I was allowed to have Senkyo grow and show her growth and give her a really nice full arc, from the beginning and then on to Planet of the Dead.
Yeah.
Can you hear me at all from my dog?
No, I heard you. It's ironic because you're talking. You have the problem of your dog barking, and I have a cat scratching at my door trying to get in.
I'm gonna close my door. One second.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm back.
All right. That'll be a simple little editing trick to stick in there.
Okay.
So one question is you did the 2 Butcher Queen books. Did you fund them both through Kickstarter?
Those are both Kickstarters, yeah.
So what was your experience like going to Kickstarter? Did you like what was your goal for the books, if you don't mind me asking? Like, was it a big campaign?
The monetary goal?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there were 10,000.
Okay, yeah. So you were like funding the whole book through the Kickstarter campaign.
The whole series, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's
Right.
awesome. That's hard to do.
It's so hard to do.
Yeah, I know.
It's so hard to do. But when we first did when I did the Rough and Tumble, we actually met with a PR friend of ours,
Oh,
a
okay.
marketing friend,
Cool.
and she gave us some really, really great advice. And we got creative with it ourselves. But the main thing, it seems like when you do these, the crowdfunding stuff, is that for that 30 days you live it. You live the campaign. And it's constantly reaching out to people, doing interviews, and one thing we learned, and that I still do, is do events like in the real world, outside of the cyber world, outside of the online world. And like one time, I think for the Dead Palace, we did just an appearance at a restaurant here in town, and had a little booth set up, and they were cool with it, and they actually had menu items based on like some of the stories.
Oh, cool.
It was really great. Yeah. And so just weird stuff like that, just like this past weekend was Free Comic Book Day.
Right.
And I was there with Lorenzo Lozana and Tyler Ryder. Oh, no, Tyler B. Ruff.
Yeah. Oh, and, yeah. Tyler Ruff.
Yeah, Tyler Ruff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was able to promote that there, and a couple of guys actually backed it there,
Oh, right on
site, And so all that kind of stuff helps. And it's not just doing online stuff. It's also like printing up postcards and dropping those off at local comic shops, and doing podcasts.
Yeah.
Like that you're doing, and actually going out into the real world space to meet people face to face and talk about the project.
Yeah.
And that's why it's exhausting.
Yeah, it is. There's a sense that's really, in my experience, because I've done a few Kickstarters, but they've all been smaller scale. But even on the smaller scale, there is a sense of it can be very overwhelming, because it feels like you're constantly working at like 100% max strength all the time to just like scrimp what little bit you can get out of anybody, like doing events just to get like a handful of pledges. But if you didn't do the event, you wouldn't have gotten any of those pledges. And if you do that all month, all those little pledges that you're getting does add up to a full campaign. And
and it's not just that too, it's preparing for it, spending like a month and a half, 2 months before you even start actively preparing for it and getting ideas for it. And but if you're passionate about it, it's all good. It's like the Atonement Bell. I'm so thrilled with how it's turning out.
I saw you're over 50% at the time of us talking, right? Are you about?
I think we're at 52% right now. Like 6 days in.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Which is awesome. Yeah, I'm really happy about that. But the work has just begun.
Yeah, exactly. So, you barely even started. 6 days. You got 20 some odd days still.
26 days, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, 24 days.
24, yeah. But still, a lot of work.
It is. But it's worth it.
What so is Atonement Bell your third Kickstarter?
1, 2, 3, 4. It's my fifth.
Oh, fifth. Oh, wow. My goodness.
Yeah. Well, the first one was officially run by my writing partner Oscar, my buddy, that I wrote Rough and Tumble with. But like Dead Palace, Butcher Queen, Black Star City, and Butcher Queen, Planet of the Dead, Those were mine, and this one is obviously I'm doing. So yeah, 5 altogether.
Oh, cool. Well, wow. So you got 5 Kickstarters under your belt. So you're a hardened veteran, I would say at this point.
Yeah, I mean it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do the best I can.
Yeah.
But
There's always a learning process, I think
yeah,
with a lot of creative endeavors is you're always learning constantly.
right.
Is there
Yeah.
anything that you've done with the Atonement Bell campaign that you either didn't do or maybe did differently from previous campaigns that you may have learned before, or are you pretty set?
Not really learned as much, but this is the first one that I've like in the past, like with the 2 Butcher Queen series. Ben Sawyer was he lives in St. Louis also, so we were able to get together and plan stuff sometimes and things like
Yeah.
that. It's different now because Raymond lives in Los Angeles, and when you're working creatively, that's fine because you can work online and communicate however.
Right.
However, it's the first time where I had to do more myself than usual. And that was kind of a new challenge or new addition to the challenges of everything.
Yeah, that I think this is another thing that I've talked about, I know in previous episodes, is the double-edged sword that is the current internet global media communication. It's like so great. It's so easy. Like every single book that I've made has been with somebody like on the other side of the world, or at least on the other side of the country.
It's a great feeling.
It's amazing to just be able to hook up with people and make it happen. It's so great. It never would have happened in any other way. But the flip side to that is there is that separation and sometimes that sense of isolation where you are just kind of by yourself, like when it comes to doing something in person, for example, or like if you're at a comic book convention. Like as I've found running comic book conventions where you're just the writer trying to push books, it can be very challenging without the artist there to show off the art, because people are drawn to art. That's why it's a comic book, is because people like art.
The main question a writer always gets is, are you the artist?
Yeah.
Or you do art? I let my dog out of my office. She came into my office and locked herself out.
Sure.
She's a diva. I mean, she's totally out of control.
Star of the show.
She thinks she's a star of everything.
Everything, yeah. But yeah, that is definitely it's like I said, it's a double-edged sword. It's the best and worst thing. It's so great being able to work with people wherever, but yeah, it can be very frustrating, when you're there on scene in the moment and you're thousands and thousands of miles apart from the other person that's making it happen.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. And the whole thing with the internet making the world smaller, getting us close together. It's great to be able to create your art, whatever it is you do, whether it's writing or music or whatever else, and get it out there. At the same time, a lot of other people are doing that too, which I think you and I have talked about before we started, and that's part of the challenge as well, is trying to fight through that noise and all that stuff.
It can be overwhelming. There's just so much stuff out there. But I always find that I like doing comic book conventions a lot, although they can be very overwhelming, I guess is just the word. If you're doing a lot by yourself, especially, it just can feel like tireless, thankless work. But it is always a reminder. It's really easy to get kind of caught up in online circles or just on the online scene and be like, you're constantly grading yourself on where you're at there. But then you get out into a different scene at a comic book convention, for example, which is ostensibly a smaller pool than the whole internet.
Right.
But it's a different pool. And there's people there that have they've never heard of you. They don't know anything about you. And they've never even heard of any of these other things that you're comparing yourself to online that may be doing gangbusters online. But these people, there really are just that many people out there that not everybody is always in the same space. It's kind of,
Yeah. Or
it's
always
important to remember.
online.
Or always
Right.
online. That's what
Yeah.
I mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's easy to get wrapped up in the internet figures and just like internet scenes, but the world really is even that much bigger, which I guess can be intimidating in its own way.
Yeah, it can be. But that's why it's good to do, like you said, conventions and get out there in the real world, because you have conversations with people, you can engage with other human beings and
Hmm.
discuss your shared passions and talk about your work. And that's what it's all about. That's why we write comics, is to get our ideas and our stories out there into the world.
Right.
And if you just rely on doing that, online, you can do that, but you miss a lot of joy. I think you miss a lot of joy in
Hmm.
being able to tangibly, give somebody something and
Yeah.
and talk to them about it, in the same space,
Oh, for
same
sure.
physical space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm somebody who I like I like the face to face stuff. I mean, that's
Oh yeah.
why, like, I've kind of I've done podcast stuff before, and I've kind of been around on the internet, but it wasn't until recently that Zoom or other video calling technology got to the point where it's so ubiquitous and so cheap and easy that it's like I've really felt comfortable doing it. Just being able to, this is as close as we're going to get to being in the same room with each other, and
Yeah.
that's really just, I personally just feel like I work better in those circumstances, like,
Oh, totally. Yeah.
and I think a
It's
lot of
more.
people do too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more natural, right? I mean, it's
Hmm.
you can see the
Yeah.
person, they're right in front of you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So many of our jobs entail looking at a computer screen
Hmm.
anyway, and
Yeah.
so it's nice to get out there and
Yeah.
mingle with the other humans.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your book that you have on Kickstarter right now. It's called The Atonement Bell.
Right.
I was able to pick up from reading the Kickstarter. It's a horror book.
It is.
Can you give a quick pitch for it?
Yeah, well, one thing, horror is my favorite genre. I'm a big horror fan.
That was going to be my follow-up question.
Oh, yeah.
I have to assume you like horror. You're talking about all these horror books that you're working on. But yeah,
Yeah.
go continue.
I love horror, and one thing I love about it is there's so much so much subtext you can add to it. There's so many
Hmm.
things that happen um, in society that uh, bother you, rub you the wrong way, and horror is such a great way to express how you feel about those things, and it's also a surprising way to show empathy in stories. And I think that when we write stories, when we put stuff out into the world, I think it's a big opportunity to have uh, characters that um, allow themselves to show empathy. And I think
Hmm.
it's very important, because I think the world now needs more of that. So I think as creators, to me, it's a service that we do. It's an important part of what we do.
Hmm.
So the Atonement Bell is about a grieving mother and son who are traveling out of town to visit estranged family, estranged relatives, and they become involved through a series of circumstances, uh, kind of getting caught between a conflict between a coven and an inner city church. And it's a really, really fun story. And it all takes place in St. Louis. I've never actually written a story that takes place in St. Louis. So
Okay.
there's a lot of things I love St. Louis, and
Hmm.
um, there's a lot of things about the city that I love, and things that I think, could be a lot better. And the story really examines those things, family, the idea of family, the concept of family, and how far we would go to help each other, to be there for each other,
Yeah.
and the impact of religion on all those things. And so that all those things are there, but you can also enjoy the book as just a straight up, creepy horror story. And I think
Hmm.
it works really good in both of those scenarios, I think.
Yeah.
Uh, my one thing I'm loving about the book is the characters, my main protagonist. It's
Hmm.
three teenagers, basically. There's Jake, who's 14, his cousin Baby Al, who's 16, and Al's friend Sarah, who's a Bosnian girl that lives, a couple blocks from where Baby Al is in the inner city, and her parents run a Bosnian store. And I love this. I'll be so sad when the series ends because I'm having so much fun hanging out with them. I mean,
Yeah,
you know what
yeah.
that's like too. I'm sure it's like
Yep.
when you really love your characters so much, you don't want to say goodbye to them. You
Mhm.
know, you want to hang out with them more, and that's kind of what I'm going through right now, and it's such a joy to work on, and I can't wait for people to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Horror comics especially seem to be uh they're always kind of doing well in comic books. Like they've always been around, but they've never been the like, except for maybe back, in the 50s with the original, like the EC comic stuff, like the
Yeah,
creepy and that.
eerie and yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And then once the comic code came in, that really just destroyed the genre of horror
yeah.
comics. It wasn't until like the 80s that it was able to kind of creep back in. And so I know there's always been like a hunger for horror comics. And so they're always there. I'm glad to see that people are still doing that. Do you
Oh,
have
cool.
any, like, I know you're saying you love horror as a genre. Do you have any horror influences that you draw on mostly? Do you draw more from like writers or films or comics, or is it just kind of a little bit of everything?
It is a little bit of everything. Like when it comes to horror, I mean, I'm kind of all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
In films, I'm a huge fan of the classic Universal horror films,
Oh yeah.
especially the 30s pre-code stuff,
Sure, yeah.
like Black Cat, Dracula's Daughter, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I was a teen in the 80s, so 80s horror is a big one for me.
Uh-huh.
And I love the modern filmmakers like Jordan Peele, I think is amazing.
Yeah.
Like Get Out
Oh, Get
and
Out was
Us.
huge.
Oh, so yeah, film wise, I like that. As far as comics, I collect a lot of the older comics like, Eerie and
Mm-hmm.
uh, what's the DC title? I can't believe I'm blanking out. The Mansion or Haunted Mystery, or I can't remember right now, but
House of Mystery.
House of Mystery.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And those and I in recent books like Bone Parish is really amazing. I really liked Red Mother, and actually the letterer for Red Mother is working on the Atonement Bell. Which
Ed Dukeshire.
yes,
Yeah, yeah. I know Ed's name. I can't say that I know the guy, of course, but
yeah,
yeah, he founded Digital Webbing, which is one of the go-to places for people just trying to get into doing indie comics and meeting other creators. So
yeah,
yeah, and he's a working letterer, and he's been in the industry forever.
he has, yeah, and he's
Yeah.
he's super nice, and that's the great thing too. Is I've never had this situation, but I can't imagine doing a book like this is this much of a commitment and working with someone who's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, yeah. No,
But
it's
luckily,
true.
yeah. But Raymond Estrada and Ed Dukeshire, I mean, they're both really terrific guys, and so far so good. It's been nothing but good vibes with them.
hmm One thing that I think so I'll go ahead and say up front, like, horror is not my favorite genre, but I
Right.
don't dislike it. I've got my selection of horror films, and like I love John Carpenter.
Uh-huh.
There's select horror stuff that I think is great, but I do think that one of the things that's been a blight on horror films, especially modern horror films or cheap
Mhm.
horror films, is the reliance on a jump scare, in the
Yeah,
film. And one of the things I love about horror comics is that's almost not an option.
it's
Like
not
you
an
have,
option at all.
right,
Yeah,
yeah, you have
yeah,
like the page turn, where you
sure.
can, but it's not the
Yeah.
same as a jump scare where it's you just draw it
No,
out and then blam.
right.
So that's one thing that I've always liked about horror fiction, writing and comics especially. And this kind of gets back into that thing we were talking about earlier of where comics occupy this very specific place where it's visual. So you can come up with some really horrific and striking and disturbing visuals, but it's not, it can't be cheap. Like, it can't just be a loud noise that just shocks you and startles you out of your
Right.
seat. Like, it has to
Yeah.
be something that's actually scary.
And it's interesting, like I know that with a lot of horror films and I think horror in general, it's really because a lot of it is so high concept and
Hmm.
everything else that it's really hard to land the ending. It's really
Yeah.
hard to land a good ending with horror stuff, it seems like, specifically. And what I've always tried to do with stories that I write is actually
Hmm.
start with the ending and kind of work back a little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah.
because especially in horror, if you don't have an ending that's satisfying, it's kind of a ripoff, you
Oh,
know.
yeah. Yeah.
And even recently, I've read a few books that I've loved, and then the ending comes, and it's like, you gave up. You didn't know how to end it, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, yeah, with the Atonement Bell, I'm really happy with the way that works, and it works really good in a 4-issue format. And I'm really happy with the pace and the ending and everything else. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I do think, yeah, I'm of the opinion that just writing a story in general, regardless of genre, the ending is the hardest part. Like, it's easy to come up with an idea of like your characters and this happens, and then a lot of people, I think, I mean, I've had this problem myself anyway. Maybe I'm just projecting onto everybody else, but it's easy to come up with an idea in your characters, and then you kind of like in your head, it becomes a story, and then it ends, and
Yeah.
you don't always have that ending there, and you're just thinking like something happens, and then it'll turn into a story, and so that's where I think most things, if they fall apart, that's usually how it falls apart, because they can't stick the ending, or they didn't spend enough time on it to really work it out, or they just never had an idea for an ending in the first place.
Yeah, and I've been
It,
there too. But I don't even move forward with it with anything until I've got an ending that I think is worthwhile and does justice to the characters, and
yeah,
that's satisfying to the reader. Hopefully, I mean, you never know
yeah,
until it's out, but it's got to be satisfying to you. And so that's kind of why I like, when I have the idea for a story or series or whatever, I try to definitely have a place where it's gonna all land, you
hmm,
know. That way I just know where I'm going, and then I
yeah,
kind of go back.
yeah.
So yeah.
That's always, I always advise people, that's the best thing to do when coming up with an idea, is really think about your ending, like how you want the story to end, and then you can get there. Then you have something you're working toward. But I
Yeah.
do agree that's probably especially important in horror, because I do think that, especially with horror, the ending is kind of the whole thing. Like, because a lot of horror is not all, a lot of horror can be a slow burn. Like, it's like creating an atmosphere, and you're building to that ending. The ending is
Yeah.
almost like the whole point of it. So yeah,
Well,
that's
but that's what's been fun about the Atonement Bell, in that every issue has some pretty crazy things that happen in there,
mhm.
but they all serve the kind of the forward momentum of the story. They really serve the narrative. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So hopefully by the time it gets to the ending, it's like, of course, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah.
of
It
course
feels
that's what
it
happened.
feels natural, but it's also a payoff. Yeah,
Yeah,
I got you.
yeah.
No, that's good. I'm glad to hear, though, that that's at the forefront of your mind. Though I shouldn't be surprised, as somebody with 5 Kickstarters under your belt. You're doing something right, so that's good.
I mean, I just all it is I what I'm really passionate about my stories, like I'm sure you are about yours,
Hmm.
and it's just all about having the work ethic and the discipline to devote yourself to all the self promotion that you have to do, and that's very
Yep.
difficult, because I mean most normal sane people don't like to, like, right now, like, talk about themselves and talk
Yeah.
about their work, and for any length of time past a minute, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But
It's
it's a
definitely the hardest aspect that I struggle with is like the promotional aspect of it. It's like I just
Yeah.
want to lock myself into a room and just like work on stuff. I don't want to have to be like out all the time, but it's like it's part of what it is.
I think probably one thing that helps me out with it is that I've been in St. Louis, like, just been in bands and
Mm-hmm.
played out and done theater, acted in theater and stuff. So that
Mm-hmm.
that at least prepared me somewhat for like being kind of front facing and being able to talk to people
Yeah.
about creative stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's a good skill to have. And I think it's something that that I'll be perfectly cravenly honest. That's part of the reason I started doing this podcast was just after a year in quarantine of like not doing cons and not talking to people. I was like, I need to just get, have some FaceTime with people and just talk
Oh
about
yeah,
stuff and just like reconnect, and
sure.
and hone my people skills a little bit better,
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's absolutely
that's
one of the
good. Yeah,
reasons I started doing this.
that's awesome, and that's great. Do you play music? I see guitars in the
I
background.
do. Yeah. I don't do it as regularly as I used to, but yeah, I spent a few years bouncing around in bands and playing in St. Louis.
Oh, cool.
Mostly
Okay,
punk stuff.
nice.
Yeah.
That's
But
really cool.
yeah, it's one of those things where I always say like I'll get back to it at some point, but
Yeah.
it's like we just get older and
I
just
know
time.
that's the hard part. That's where the
Yeah.
discipline comes in because it's like, you're right. I want to play music and I like to do more acting things, but I'm really focused on this book, the
Mm-hmm.
series, and I'm a dad.
Mm-hmm.
I've got two sons and a wife, my family, and it's a challenge. And you're right. The older you get, the more difficult it is, and it's
Yeah.
all about really being able to be disciplined about your time
Yes.
and
I
you know
I yeah. I say
and
that it's all about time management.
yeah, absolutely, that's so important
Mm-hmm.
for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think for anything.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about the Atonement Bell. I want to talk about the art.
Okay.
I'm sorry, could you say his name again one more time?
Raymond Estrada.
Okay, and you saw him working. I'm just picking all this up just from our conversation we've had right now. So you said
Okay.
you said you saw him in was it another anthology or another book that you saw him working
No,
on?
so he was in have you heard about Razor Blades? That
I've
Shapes Tinian's horror anthology.
Oh yes, yeah,
Yeah.
Tinian, yeah.
Yeah, he was so Raymond was in issue 3 of that.
Okay,
But I actually saw Raymond, his work a few months ago for a book that's coming out this month called The Box on Red 5 Comics that
right, that's what you said.
Joshua Starnes wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And Josh was showing me some of the artwork, and I was like I was telling you earlier, I was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I'm writing this story right now. And, I know Ben's really busy right now, and I would
Mm-hmm.
love to be able to talk to this guy because honestly, what he's doing, his whole style, his whole aesthetic is completely what I'm imagining this
Yeah.
book to be. And that has never happened to me before. It's the first time where it's like, oh, that would work really good with this, like
Mm-hmm.
perfectly. And so I Josh gave me his contact info and I reached out to him, and luckily he was really open to it. He
Cool.
likes the story and everything else, and ever since then, it's like it's my hunch was correct because like I get pages back from him, and right now they're just inks for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just beautiful. They're
Yeah.
just beautiful, and they really serve the story so well.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't wait till you see it, man.
Yeah. No, the pages that you've shown look really good so far.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the most exciting, but also like nerve inducing and stressful aspects of making comics is like finding the right artist
yeah,
and like getting the right look for the comic, because it's a comic book, so the art really is what sells it.
oh
You can
sure.
have a great idea, but it's the art that's really got to put it over the
Oh, of
top.
course. I mean, that's the first thing you see.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what sells it. At first glance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you're absolutely right. And and so far people have been so, you know, responsive in a positive way to the work, the little bit that we've shown so far, and it's been really, really nice to hear.
Yeah.
What's great is that is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
You know?
Nice.
And so people that, back the campaign, they're going to be seeing all the artwork first before anybody else does. And that'll be really fun as well. Just putting those little, peaks out
Yeah.
there.
Do you ever feel worried? Like, I know you were talking about working with Ben Sawyer, who's from St. Louis. So you guys have worked multiple times, but like one of the things that I find really frustrating, not frustrating, but like nerve inducing is like when you're finding good artists and you see some artists and you're like, wow, he's amazing. He's perfect. Or she, they're just great. They're so good. And I really want to work with them, but how have they not blown up already? Like, how are they not already like too busy to work with me? And then there's that fear of like, it's like, maybe I can get them to work with me, but then by the time we get it going, get it together, they're going to already have something else going. I know that's something that bothers, it just like stresses me out, but I just might be a nervous Nelly about this kind of stuff.
No, the thing is that there are a lot of artists out there, and working in comics is not easy. It's not for the weak.
Right.
It really isn't.
You're right.
And so you can't. It's really hard to be stressed about things that you have no control over whatsoever. If you love your story, you'll find an artist that you're happy with. Ultimately, even if it's not your first choice, you'll find that person. It's easy to get stressed about that stuff, and I totally get that. But at the same time, to paraphrase David Lee Roth, you can't get stressed about the little shit, and it's all little shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you just have to kind of like hang in there and keep pushing forward, but make sure it always remains enjoyable, because the minute that it becomes a main source of stress, it's not worth it. Forget it. Do something else. That's what I've told myself too. It's like, if I'm not enjoying it, I'll do something else. It's not the end of the world. But yeah, you just have to have confidence in your abilities, and I'm sure you do. And that's just it doesn't mean that you're like, you think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread or whatever. But
no, I know what you mean though.
you have to confidence in your story, and your ability to say to somebody, hey, I've got this story, I think this would be really good for us to work on together. That's kind of what I'm talking about, I guess.
No, that's good advice. I think for anybody, even just with jumping into comics. I'm sorry, just to add on to that, it's also, I always think it's really important to take stock of things that you've done and done well. Like you've done Kickstarters before that have been successful. You've got this really cool podcast. You're doing more than probably 90% of the people who want to be doing those things. Yeah,
you're actually doing them.
That's what I tell people. It's you got to be doing something. You just always got to be working, and just like one of the things I always tell some of my my friends and sometimes collaborators that I've worked with, like whenever they're getting stressed out about what's going on, like my art is not as popular as it should be, or so and so just like is doing so good. How is I always tell people, you just got to put the blinders on and just focus on your work, because that's really at the end of the day, that's the only thing you have any control over is your work.
And that's such a good point. I mean, you can't get into the trap, and it is a trap. It's an ugly trap of comparing yourself to other people. It does not work.
No.
I think for me, I've gotten to the point where whatever happens, but for me, the work is really its own reward. When you're writing that script and when you're collaborating, that's the reward. For me, and it's not about like being super popular or super
Right.
famous or whatever. It's just the work is its own reward.
Yep.
That's sort of my mantra. And also, like, one thing that I want to do, one of my goals in life is to, before I die, I want to leave as much cool, fun stuff behind as I possibly can for people to enjoy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
every day when I wake up, I think, what can I do today?
Hmm.
Whether it's writing, working on this project or something else. Because that's making stuff for people to enjoy. It's such a great gift. I hate to be corny, but it's such a great opportunity.
No, it is. You're right.
And not everybody gets a chance to do that. And
Hmm.
it's great.
Yeah. So one final topic I want to touch on before we about run out of time is so you've been funding these books successfully on Kickstarter. Have you been I know you had dropped the name Red 5. You've been publishing with them, and
Mhm.
I know them as a publisher, like they do Atomic Robo and such,
Yeah.
like small press. Do you primarily work with small press publishers? Have you like self-published stuff yourself? Like what's kind of
Oh
the
yeah,
general?
I've self-published stuff. I mean, Rough and Tumble and the Dead Palace
Hmm.
were self-published. Butcher Queen was our first publishing contract,
Hmm.
working for a publisher, but they're the only publisher that I've worked for
Oh, okay. Yeah.
thus far. So yeah, that's been my only experience, but it's been a really good one. I mean, they're really great to work with. They're really, cool guys.
Hmm.
The two publishers that basically run it, and they're hard workers, and when they believe in your story, and they're happy to help push it
Yeah.
and get it out there. And it's great to be able to see your stuff in the in Diamond and
Yeah.
previews and have it go all over the place. Like when we did the first Butcher Queen, it actually debuted at San Diego Comic-Con
Okay, cool.
in 2019, I think it was, and that was my
Hmm.
first time there. And I was
Oh,
there
okay.
as like a guest or like a creator,
Hmm.
and it blew my mind. I've always wanted to go there, and it was so cool to go there with a book. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
so awesome. I don't think Ben had been there a number of times before
Hmm.
as a just a fan, but
Okay.
for both of us, it was our first time there as guests,
Yeah.
and it was great. And it's really nice to be able to know that, like you said, people all over the place. It's in stores for people to buy, not anywhere around here. You know what I mean? And
Right.
it's really fun.
Yeah.
It's reaching as many people as you can is something we all want to do.
Hmm.
As writers and artists. And so yeah, I never take that for granted. It's such a cool thing.
Yeah. So what's the plan with Atonement Bell? Are you gonna publish it yourself? Is it gonna go through somebody else?
I think ultimately it's going to go through Red 5.
Okay, cool.
That's the plan. I've kind of pitched it to them already,
Hmm.
and they kind of already have kind of a general plan about that. So probably Red
Sure.
5. Um, and we're hoping right now, I've been talking about January of next year, January
Hmm.
2022, this January,
Hmm.
but it might be a little bit later than that. It just depends on what they want to do and what the best time
Sure.
is.
Yeah.
For people that back us on Kickstarter, they'll be the first to know, and no matter what, the first to get it before anybody else does, which
Yeah.
is part of the fun of Kickstarter, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've been watching over the years the landscape of comics publishing and distribution kind of shift with the growing crowdfunding. Like I've seen a lot of books, like early on there was this debate, kind of an argument of whether or not books that were successful on Kickstarter would work in the direct market. Like would it be valuable for a publisher to take something off Kickstarter, because all the people that are going to buy it already got it on Kickstarter, so then you put it
Right.
in the comic book stores and nobody's going to buy it because all your fans have already bought it. But I
Yeah.
do think that there's a shift coming where there's a lot of books that are there. I don't know if it's just the it just took this long for the the readership or the fans, just the market in general, to kind of adopt and adapt to it, where you can do your successful Kickstarter and get the money to cover the costs of the book, and then you can still get it in stores and get it in front of even more people who never even heard of the Kickstarter,
Yeah,
and
that's
pick
the
up
key. I
issues
mean,
like that.
oh yeah, definitely. I mean, in the case of Butcher Queen, like both of those series, I think I can't remember how many backers we had for each one, but that compared to it going out to stores and people being able to get it is two totally different things. And so
Right.
I think the industry just sort of saw that, the people that backed the Kickstarter as more of, okay, well, this is where the buzz can start.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? They
exactly.
look at
Just
it from
it
that
just shows there's
perspective.
interest from somebody,
Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
you
It's a
can
good
push that to other people.
right. It's a good litmus test for the project itself. And so yeah, I think a lot of those things work hand in hand in a really good way.
Hmm. Well, that's good. I'm glad to see the momentum you've got going so far. Like we talked
Thank you.
about earlier, you're 5 or 6 days in, and just over 50%. That's a good sign.
Yeah,
For the first week, not bad
yeah.
at all. So
I'm
I
happy.
yeah, so before we cut this off completely, obviously you've got the Kickstarter. Where can people find your stuff online or find you and in your work?
I'm on Twitter at Jim Ousley. I'm on Instagram at radio_Jimbo. Stupid Instagram name that I never changed. And on Facebook. But yeah, Butcher Queen and the Atonement Bell, you can find both of those on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you want to buy the Butcher Queen series, the Volume 1 trade collection, or any of the individual issues, you can get those on at red5comics.com, their web store, on Comicsology. And yeah, that's about it.
Right on. Well, thank you for doing this, Jim. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. I think this is the first time, and it's really cool, man. It's really nice to be able to talk to you, and thank you very much for having me on. It's
Yeah,
like nobody's going to know about the project if
I know. Yeah, it's just the grind, as it were.
Yeah,
Just you gotta just be out there constantly, gotta be working.
yeah,
So yeah, I'm
yeah.
glad to be a part of it. I'm just glad. We'll just say
I'm glad
that.
too.
Yeah. All right.
And
Well, we'll
Macy's
end it
glad.
there.
She stopped barking.
Yeah. So everybody definitely go check out the Atonement Bell on Kickstarter. I'm a backer.
Awesome.
You gave me the hard sell in a Facebook message,
Yep.
which that's something that I almost brought up. We didn't talk about. I think some creators tiptoe around that of whether or not they go for the like direct message, like, hey, support my Kickstarter or not. And
Yeah.
the one thing I've always fallen back on is a lot of people complain about it. But you know what? If you get even 2 backers off of it, or one, if you get even 1 backer off of it that you wouldn't have got from not doing it, then it's worth doing,
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Especially if you're polite about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
that's the
just
key.
don't spam them. And yeah, but otherwise, it's no rules. You're an independent creator, and you're trying to tell your story.
Yep.